My name is Arthur Vance, and just a few years ago, my face was on the cover of every business magazine you can imagine. The visionary, the Midas touch, the man who built tomorrow. They called me a titan of industry. My company, Innovate Dynamics, was a beast, a billion-dollar empire built on sleek gadgets and the promise of a smarter future. From the top of my glass tower, I could see the entire city, and it felt like I owned every light that flickered below. But what happens when the man who is supposed to have all the answers realizes he doesn't even know the right questions? What happens when the empire starts to crumble, not from an attack by a rival, but from a sickness deep within its own walls? That's where my story really begins. Not in a boardroom, but in the dead of night, with the smell of floor cleaner in the air and the quiet wisdom of a man most people never even saw. It all came crashing down with the Omni. It was supposed to be our masterpiece, a device that would integrate every piece of technology in your home, your car, your life. We poured hundreds of millions into it. We hired the best minds, the most aggressive marketing teams, and we launched it with a spectacle that would make kings blush. And it was a complete, catastrophic failure. The reviews were brutal. A solution in search of a problem, one critic wrote. Clunky, confusing, and completely unnecessary, said another. Sales were abysmal. Our stock price, once the darling of Wall Street, began to plummet. It wasn't a dip, it was a nosedive. Have you ever felt that sickening lurch in your stomach when you realize you've made a terrible, irreversible mistake? Now imagine that feeling, but with the weight of 12,000 employees and billions of dollars in shareholder value tied to it. That was my reality, every single second of every day. The nights became my prison. Sleep was a stranger. I'd walk the empty halls of Innovate Tower, the silence mocking the frantic energy that once filled them. The awards lining the hallways felt like relics from a forgotten civilization. My reflection in the dark glass of the boardroom window showed a man I barely recognized, hollowed out, haunted. My board of directors, the same men who had toasted my genius a year ago, were now sharpening their knives. The calls were constant. Arthur, we need a plan. Arthur, the investors are getting nervous. Arthur, we need to cut our losses. Their voices were a chorus of panic, but I had nothing to offer them but hollow reassurances. I was the captain of a sinking ship, and I was fresh out of lifeboats. One night, it was well past 2 a.m. I was in my office, staring at a spreadsheet filled with red numbers that looked like bleeding wounds. The city lights below, once a symbol of my power, now felt like a million accusing eyes. The pressure in my chest was immense, a physical weight that made it hard to breathe. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt utterly and completely defeated. The door to my office creaked open. I didn't even look up, assuming it was security doing their nightly rounds. I heard the gentle rattle of a trash can being emptied, the soft swish of a cleaning cloth on a surface. Then a voice, calm and quiet, cut through the silence. That's a whole lot of worry for one man to carry, Mr. Vance. I opened my eyes. Standing by my desk was a man I'd seen 100 times but never truly noticed. He was older, maybe in his late 60s, with kind eyes and hands that were worn from years of hard work. He was wearing the simple gray uniform of the building's cleaning crew. A name tag on his shirt read, Samuel. He wasn't looking at me with pity or awe, just a simple, human observation. I was so used to people either fearing me or flattering me that his directness caught me off guard. I don't think they pay you to be a psychologist, Samuel, I said, my voice harsher than I intended. It was a defense mechanism. The titan of industry couldn't show weakness, especially not to the janitor. He just smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. No, sir, they don't. They pay me to take out the trash. But I've learned after all these years, you can tell a lot about a place by the kind of trash it puts out. He gestured with his head toward the wastebasket he had just emptied. Used to be, this whole building's trash was full of pizza boxes, sketches on napkins, champagne corks after a big launch. People were celebrating. They were creating. Now, he paused, looking me straight in the eye, it's mostly just empty coffee cups and aspirin packets. A whole lot of fuel but not much joy. His words hit me harder than any analyst's report. It was such a simple observation, yet it was profoundly true. The joy was gone. The energy, the collaborative chaos that had defined Innovate dynamics in our early years, had vanished. We had become a machine that ran on caffeine and anxiety. We were efficient, we were professional, but we were hollow. It's just a rough patch, I mumbled, trying to dismiss his observation, trying to dismiss the cold dread that was creeping up my spine. Samuel nodded slowly, continuing to wipe down the conference table in my office. I had a car once, he said, his voice soft and rhythmic, like he was telling a story to a child. An old Ford. Ran beautiful for years. Then one day, it started making a little noise. A little tick-tick-tick. I ignored it. Figured it was just old. Then the ticking got louder. I turned up the radio so I wouldn't have to hear it. He stopped wiping and looked at me. You know what happened next, don't you? I didn't answer. I just stared at him, this man in a janitor's uniform who was suddenly dissecting my entire corporate failure with a simple metaphor about a car. The engine seized up, he continued. On the highway. Middle of rush hour. A tow truck, a big repair bill, whole mess. The mechanic told me, Sam, you had a little problem with an oil pump. Would have been a $50 fix. But you let it go so long, you destroyed the whole engine. You were so busy driving, you forgot to listen to what the car was telling you. He finished wiping the table, the surface now gleaming under the office lights. He picked up his cart, ready to leave. This place, Mr. Vance, he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. It's making a lot of noise. The question is, are you just turning up the radio, or are you going to listen? He walked out of my office, leaving me alone in the silence. But the silence was different now. It wasn't empty. It was filled with the echo of his words. You were so busy driving, you forgot to listen. I looked at the bleeding spreadsheet, at the angry emails, at the frantic board meeting agendas. For months, I had been trying to fix the engine from the driver's seat. I had been yelling at it, throwing money at it, demanding that it perform better. But I had never once gotten out of the car to listen. I hadn't bothered to check the oil. That night, something shifted inside me. The desperation was still there, but it was now mixed with a tiny, fragile flicker of something else. An idea. It was a terrifying, insane idea that went against every single thing I had ever learned in business school, against every instinct that had made me a billionaire. What if the answer to my billion-dollar problem wasn't in a spreadsheet? What if it was in the trash cans? What if the key to saving my company wasn't in the executive wing, but on the factory floor, in the call centers, in the quiet corners where the real work was done? What if, to save my empire, I had to stop acting like an emperor and start acting like a mechanic? The next morning, I didn't go to the boardroom. I didn't call my team of VPs. I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I went to the cafeteria at 7 a.m., got a cup of coffee in a paper cup, and I sat down. Alone. At first, people avoided me. They'd see me, their eyes would widen, and they'd scurry to another table. I was a lion in a field of gazelles. But I just sat there, sipping my coffee, watching and listening. I listened to the conversations around me. The engineers weren't talking about the next big innovation. They were complaining about the new time-tracking software that made them feel like children. The marketing team wasn't buzzing about a new campaign. They were whispering about layoff rumors and updating their resumes. The anxiety was a thick, choking fog. Samuel was right. This place was running on fear. After an hour, a young woman, an intern from the design department, I think, hesitantly approached my table. Mr. Vance? Is everything okay? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. I smiled, a real smile, maybe for the first time in months. I'm not sure, to be honest, I said. Tell me something. If you could change one thing about working here, anything at all, what would it be? Her eyes widened. She probably expected me to ask about market synergy or brand optics. In the snack room, she stammered. They replaced the good granola bars with these cheap ones that taste like cardboard. And they took away the fizzy water. It was such a small, trivial thing. The old Arthur Vance would have scoffed. But the new Arthur, the one who was trying to listen, just nodded. Cardboard granola bars, I repeated. Got it? Thank you. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? A billion-dollar company teetering on the brink of collapse, and I'm getting feedback about granola bars. But it was the start. It was a crack in the armor. Later that day, I walked down to the assembly line for the Omni. No suit, no entourage. Just me in my shirt sleeves. The floor manager nearly had a heart attack when he saw me. The workers stared, their hands freezing above the conveyor belts. I walked up to a woman who looked like she'd been doing this for 30 years. "Tell me about this device," I said, picking up an Omni from the line. "Tell me the truth." She looked at her manager, who gave a frantic little shake of his head. I looked at him. "It's okay. I need to hear it." The woman took a deep breath. "Sir," she said, her voice steady, "it's too heavy. The battery cover is flimsy. We have a 10% failure rate right here on the line. And the setup, my grandson is a tech genius, and it took him an hour to get it connected to the Wi-Fi. My neighbors, they wouldn't stand a chance." I spent the next 2 hours on that factory floor. And I heard the same things over and over. We told them. We told the designers. We told the managers. But nobody listened. They said the focus groups loved the concept. They said the numbers looked good on paper. They were so busy driving, they forgot to listen to the engine. The ticking had been there all along. In the design flaws, in the complicated interface, in the cheap components my finance department had insisted on to save a few pennies. We had created a product that nobody on the assembly line would ever buy for themselves. How could we expect millions of other people to? When I got back to my office, my executive team was waiting for me, their faces a mixture of confusion and annoyance. "Arthur, where have you been? We have the quarterly review with the board in 2 days. We need a strategy." I looked at their faces, these brilliant, expensive people I had hired to be the best. And I realized they were part of the problem. They lived in the same glass tower I did. They looked at spreadsheets, not people. "Cancel the presentation," I said. The room went silent. My CO, a man named Henderson who lived and breathed profit margins, looked at me like I'd just announced I was joining the circus. "Cancel it? Arthur, they'll fire us." "They'll fire you." "Maybe," I said. "But we're not going in there with another deck of slides filled with projections and excuses. We're going in with the truth." For the next 48 hours, we didn't build a presentation. We built a case. We interviewed dozens of employees, from the factory floor to the call centers. We recorded their feedback, raw and unfiltered. We brought in the flimsy battery covers. We set up a live demonstration to show how long it took the average person to connect the Omni to a network. We compiled a report, not on financials, but on morale. On the cost of cardboard granola bars, not in dollars, but in the message it sent to our people. We value profit more than you. The day of the board meeting was tense. The air in the room was thick with hostility. The board members, 10 men and 2 women who controlled the fate of my company, sat like ancient gods ready to pass judgment. Henderson was sweating through his shirt. "Arthur," the chairman began, his voice like gravel. "We're told you've canceled the financial review. This is highly irregular. We are looking at a potential collapse. We hope you have something extraordinary to share with us." I didn't use the projector. I didn't hand out binders. I just stood at the head of the table. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, "we have failed. Not because of the market, not because of our competition, but because we stopped listening." I spent the next hour telling them everything. I told them about the flimsy battery covers, the Wi-Fi connection issues, the cardboard granola bars. I played them a 2-minute clip of a call center employee patiently trying to walk a frustrated, elderly customer through the Omni's setup process. The call ended with the customer in tears, saying, "I just feel so stupid." I told them about the ticking in the engine. I told them about Samuel. When I finished, there was a stunned silence. One of the board members, a ruthless venture capitalist named Sterling, scoffed. "Is this a joke, Arthur? We're talking about a billion-dollar crisis, and you're telling us stories about your janitor and snack food? We need a financial plan, a restructuring, layoffs." This was the moment. The moment I either backed down and became the CEO they wanted, or I stood my ground for the one I needed to be. "The layoffs aren't the solution, Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice calm but firm. They're a symptom of the disease. The disease is that the people at the top of this company have forgotten what it's like to be at the bottom. We've been looking at our employees as expenses on a spreadsheet instead of our greatest asset. We've been looking at our customers as data points instead of human beings. So what's your grand plan? Sterling sneered. A company-wide sing-along? My plan, I said, is a product recall. A full recall of every Omni device, effective immediately. We are going to take a massive financial hit. It will be painful. And then we're going to start over. But this time, we build it from the ground up. The design team will spend 1 week a month on the assembly line. The marketing team will spend 1 week a month taking customer service calls. And every single executive, including me, will spend 1 day a month working alongside our janitorial staff, our cafeteria workers, and our security guards. We are going to learn to listen again. We are going to find the joy in the trash cans. The room erupted. It was chaos. Financial suicide. He's lost his mind. We have to remove him now. Sterling was on his feet, his face purple with rage. But I just stood there and let them yell. I looked at the chairman, an older, wiser man who had been with me since the beginning. He hadn't said a word. He was just watching me, his expression unreadable. When the shouting finally died down, the chairman spoke. Arthur, he said slowly, this is the biggest gamble I have ever seen a CEO make. If this fails, the company is finished. And so are you. He paused, looking around the table at the angry faces. But it is the first time in 6 months that I have seen the man I first invested in. The man who believed that people, not products, were the heart of this company. He took a deep breath. You have my vote. Let's see if the engine is worth saving. It was a battle, but in the end, I won. Barely. The vote was 7-5. Sterling looked like he wanted to physically attack me. But the decision was made. The next day, we announced the recall. Our stock plummeted another 20%. The media called me insane. My own COO, Henderson, resigned, telling me he wouldn't be a part of this corporate therapy session. It was the darkest day in the company's history. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sliver of hope. The changes were hard. The executives grumbled about their day on the lower decks. My head of design was horrified when he had to clean the bathrooms alongside Samuel. But slowly, something started to change. The designer, after his shift, came to my office. You know, he said, I was cleaning the break room in the engineering department. I saw the whiteboard. They've figured out a way to simplify the Omni's entire operating system. It's brilliant. They said they've been trying to get a meeting to show it to me for months, but my assistant kept telling them I was too busy. He shook his head. I was too busy, alright. Too busy being important. The marketing VP, after a day of taking angry customer calls, came to me with tears in her eyes. We sold them a promise we couldn't keep, she said. We never even thought about what it would feel like to be them. It was like a dam had broken. The ideas, the solutions, the passion, it had been there all along, trapped behind walls of bureaucracy and arrogance. The ticking in the engine was the sound of our own people, trying to be heard. We redesigned the Omni from scratch. We called it the Omni 2.0, but internally, we called it the Samuel. The assembly line workers were part of the design process. The customer service reps were part of the marketing team. We didn't have focus groups, we had conversations. We brought back the good granola bars and the fizzy water. It was a small thing, but it was a symbol. A symbol that we were listening. 6 months later, we launched the Omni 2.0. There was no fancy party, no celebrity endorsements. We just released it. And a strange thing happened. People loved it. The reviews were glowing. Simple, intuitive, and genuinely useful, one said. A lesson in corporate humility, wrote another. Sales were slow at first, then they started to climb. And then they exploded. The Omni 2.0 became the best-selling product in our company's history. Our stock price didn't just recover, it soared to heights we had never seen before. The day our stock hit an all-time high, I didn't celebrate with the board. I went looking for Samuel. I found him on the 15th floor, polishing the glass wall of a conference room. I walked up to him and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. How do you thank the man who saved your empire by talking about his old car? Samuel, I finally said. I wanted to thank you. He stopped polishing and looked at our reflections in the glass. The CEO in the expensive suit and the janitor in the gray uniform, standing side by side. You didn't have to thank me, Mr. Vance, he said. You just had to listen. You did the hard part. I'd like to offer you a promotion, I said. A new position. Chief Morale Officer. A big office, a big salary. You'd be a special advisor to me. He smiled that gentle smile again. I appreciate that, sir. I truly do. But I'm a janitor. I like my work. I like keeping things clean. It's honest. Besides, he added, a twinkle in his eye, from down here, I get to see all the trash. I can tell when the engine starts ticking long before you guys in the fancy offices can. I understood. He didn't want the power or the money. His wisdom wasn't something you could put on a business card. It was something you lived. But I insisted on doing something. We created the Samuel Grant, a multi-million-dollar fund that provided scholarships for the children of our hourly employees, from the janitors to the assembly workers. We named the main auditorium in the new building the Samuel Vance Auditorium. At the dedication ceremony, he just stood quietly in the back, not wanting any attention. But I made sure everyone knew who he was. I made sure everyone knew that the strongest pillar holding up our entire empire wasn't a product or a patent, but the simple, profound wisdom of a man who took out the trash. My life is different now. I'm still a CEO. We're still a billion-dollar company, bigger than ever, actually. But I'm not the same man. I spend less time in the boardroom and more time in the cafeteria. I know the names of the security guards who watch over us at night. I know that Maria on the assembly line has a son who's brilliant at robotics and that we should probably hire him. I've learned that true vision isn't about seeing the future, it's about seeing the people who are right in front of you. So I want to ask you something. Who are the Samuels in your life? Who are the people you walk past every day without truly seeing? The barista who knows your coffee order, the bus driver who gets you to work safely, the cleaning staff who make your workspace livable. We live in a world that celebrates the people in the glass towers, the ones with the fancy titles and the loud voices. But so often, the real wisdom, the truths that can save us, are found in the quietest corners, spoken by the humblest voices. The world is full of ticking engines. The question is, are you willing to stop, get out of the car and just listen? Let me know in the comments what you think. Has a simple piece of advice ever changed your life in a big way? I read all your comments, and I'm always fascinated by the stories you share. And if this story meant something to you, consider subscribing. We share stories here that remind us that the greatest heroes are often the ones you least expect. Because sometimes, to save an empire, you don't need another visionary. You just need a good janitor who knows how to listen.